Good to see you, Debra Vega, once again. I used to be here all the time as your state rep, so I miss you. I'm so honored to be here to introduce my wife, Debra. Just a couple quick things. I went from state bureaucracy to municipal bureaucracy. I now work for the city of Holyoke, playing the economic director. I'm excited to be working with our new mayor, Josh Garcia. I'll make sure that he gets over here ASAP to introduce himself. If you haven't met him, let him know the great things we're trying to do in the city. And it's just really great to be in this holiday season and still have the blue skies. So I'm really happy about that. So a lot of you know me, and a lot of you know Debra. A lot of you know me as Debra's husband, never mind being state rep. And some of you know me as Odin's dad, our 8-year-old son. So I'm used to playing second fiddle. That's totally fine. I am lucky enough to be married to Debra. Many of you know her as your yoga teacher. Some of you have been in other workshops with her about dance. But some people don't know that she was actually a Radio City Rockette. And so I brought her from New York City right here to Holyoke, so we call her one of our own, so we can claim that we have our own Rockette here in the city of Holyoke. And two other quick things I want to say is when we first started dating, I had a shirt made up because we were going to talk about like what their families did, what their husbands did, what their wives did. And my shirt was, "My wife's a Rockette, what's your wife do?" So that was a good one, that got some good laughs. But it's really just amazing the experience that she had as a Rockette, but also in other Broadway shows. And now our son is taking up a lot of her sort of talents, if you will. He's a little performer, as many of you may know. We'll try to get him in here before the season's done. But it's been a really great experience to get to see what goes on in the Rockettes. Many of you maybe have seen them back in the day, maybe you see them on TV. And so we're going to get some of the backstory, hear some of the reality of what it's like to be a Rockette. And it's always a fun experience to hear from Debra. And so I get to introduce my wife, my friend, and the woman who cooks me dinner sometimes, our own Radio City Rockette.
Hi, everybody. So I've got a microphone on. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. Well, thank you to Aaron for taking time out of his day. I know he had to eat a really quick lunch to be here before his next meeting, which is at 1:30. So thank you, Aaron, for coming. So nice to see you. When I spoke with one of your representatives to be here, asked if I could come do this presentation today, they said, "Well, yes, you can come, but is your husband available?" And I thought that was so dang cute, and I said, "Well, I'll see what I can do." And so here he is. So thank you, love you. All right, everyone, so happy holidays, Merry Christmas to all of you. 'Tis the season to think about all things Christmas, and when I think of Christmas, I think of the Radio City Christmas Spectacular. And I don't know if you've ever been to New York City. I used to live there for many years. It was my home before I lived here. But has anyone ever seen the Radio City Christmas Spectacular? Have you ever made your way there? Yeah, great. And then if you've never seen the show, have you ever seen the Rockettes maybe on television or on the Macy's Parade, on the Jerry Lewis Telethon back in the day, or the Today Show? Yes, okay. And then are there any of you that you're just not sure who are the Rockettes? Or anyone who's like, I'm not sure who they are? Okay, you all know who they are. Okay, so they're an all-women's, it's an institution, almost 100 years old are the Rockettes, because they've been around a really long time. And they are an all-women's precision dance company, and I am so proud that I was one of them back in the late 90s and early 2000s. And so today I'm going to take you on a little bit of a history journey, not only my own personal stories, but where did the Rockettes start? Who started them? And how does one become a Rockette? There's a lot of questions about the Rockettes, kind of a mystique or mysteriousness. I don't know if that's a word, but mystery about them. So I'm here to unlock all of those questions for you today. But I'm going to start with who are the Rockettes? And so I don't know if you saw us earlier, we were fiddling around with a lot of technology. Don't you just love technology when it works? We love it when it works. But when it doesn't work, we end up having to do what we can, and I'm going to show you a few things on this itty bitty computer screen instead of a big giant screen. And we're just going to be patient with that, and we're just going to work through it today. But mostly I'm going to be speaking anyway, and I would love to answer your questions throughout the presentation, and I'll save a good portion for question and answers at the end. So I'm just going to forward this. Oh, so before I do that, this is me right there on the Today Show. So that was one of the really cool things that I got to do when I was a Rockette. It's in 2006, which was my final year performing. And probably one of the more terrifying things I did as a Rockette, dancing on national television, but also really amazing experience. So I'm going to tell you more about that later. And we're just going to, okay. So let me just tell you, there is so much information out there about the Rockettes. You can go to YouTube and look up, you can spend hours looking at all the resources. But what I've done today is picked out a few gems that I thought were really concise, short little videos that tell you who the Rockettes are and tell you a little bit more about the journey to become a Rockette. So this I thought was a really nice little video about who the Rockettes are and how long they've been around. This was filmed in 2019, so just before the pandemic hit. And you'll hear them speak about the show coming up where they are going to use the technology of drones in the show. So I have not seen the show yet this year, so I don't know if the drones are still in there, but this was the precursor to the 2019 Christmas Spectacular. All right, that worked pretty well. Put my own microphone up to the speaker there. So, as you can see, a lot goes into the show. There's just as much choreography backstage as there is on stage. And it's not just learning the steps, it's about where you fit in a precise grid. It's almost like math. Because when we learn the steps, we also learn where we fit into the grid, and it's quite mind-blowing and a lot to rehearse. But as you can see, the result is pretty spectacular. So where did the Rockettes begin? How did they start? So now we need to go back almost 100 years, or even beyond 100 years, to a man named Russell Marquardt. Russell Marquardt was from St. Louis, Missouri, and he had seen a vaudeville act called the Tiller Girls. The Tiller Girls were based out of London, or based out of England, rather, and there were lots of different groups of them that traveled and performed all over the world. Well, one of them that did the vaudeville circuit, he had seen them, and they did some precision dance. They hooked up arms, they did kicks, and he thought, I want to make my own group like that. I want to do something like that right here in St. Louis. So he did. He sought out girls that were all about the same height, that could tap and do kicks and do the precision dance like he had seen. And that's how they started back in 1925. But they weren't called the Rockettes yet. They were called the Missouri Rockets, like a rocket ship. So these Missouri Rockets were in St. Louis. At the same time, there was a theater producer named Roxy. You might have heard of the Roxy Theater. Roxy liked to name things after himself. So Roxy had this theater, and he was looking for acts for his show. And he had heard of these Rockettes, and he sent a scout out to see them, and he said, I want you to come to New York and dance at my theater. So that's what they did. Can you even imagine these young women saying, hey, Mom and Dad, I know it's great that I'm dancing here in St. Louis, but I'm going to pack up and go to New York for a little while. I don't know how that would have gone over back in that time, but they did, and they went to New York. They were a great sensation, and then the Depression hits. So the Depression hits right around 1929, and over on the other side of town, there was a developer, a billionaire, named Rockefeller. And he had bought some property along 6th Avenue. I'm sure he got it for a very good price because at the time, 6th Avenue was an undesirable place to be in New York City. There's a wonderful documentary all about the history of Radio City. I think it's something about the 75th anniversary of Radio City, if you want to look it up. And there's a historian that talks about how it is not a nice place to go. 6th Avenue at that time, nice girls did not walk there, right? So he buys this undesirable land, starts to build what is now Radio City and Rockefeller Center that we know today. Because what do you need on a piece of undesirable land? All you need is an entrance to walk into a glorious, incredible, Art Deco, beautiful 6,000 seat theater. So, can you imagine? Middle of the Depression, I'm gonna build a theater, and he did. So for the opening night of Radio City, Roxy was in charge of getting the acts together for opening night. And Roxy kind of had a little bit of trouble figuring out who he wanted the act to be. He had so many people in the show. There was something about a 4-hour performance, just went on and on and on. And it was a terrible night. There was a blizzard, a snowstorm, and he had invited all of these important people to come, and he didn't want to start the show on time because the important people weren't there, because their limousines couldn't pull up because of the snowstorm. So people were waiting and waiting and waiting. And once it got started, it went on into the wee hours. People were falling asleep. But a great takeaway from the evening were the Rockettes. Then their name had changed when they moved to the Roxy Theater. You remember, Roxy liked to name things after himself. They were called the Roxyettes at the time. The Roxyettes were a big hit of the evening. Everyone loved that precision dance. So even though opening of Radio City wasn't the greatest show, once Radio City figured out that it was going to be a music or a movie hall, and start showing premieres of films, they also wanted to have a live stage show along with the movies. And that's where the Roxyettes came in. You would go see a movie, you would also see a short live stage show starring the Roxyettes, and that started in 1934. Okay, well, that started in 1933. 1933 was also the first year that the Radio City Christmas Spectacular happened. They were still called the Roxyettes at the time. And then, jumping to 1934, we take the name Roxyettes and shorten it to the Rockettes. So they went from 1925, the Missouri Rockets, to the Roxyettes, to the Rockettes. And that's what they are known as today. Okay, so just I thought of note, Russell Marquardt, who started this group, went on to direct and choreograph them on until he was 72 years old. He retired in 1971, and I thought, wow, what a really long, incredible career directing this precision dance group. Okay, so now let's jump forward. Maybe. You can't hardly talk about the Rockettes without talking about Radio City, because they're kind of one and the same. The Radio City stage is one of the most incredible stages I have ever seen and ever danced on. There's no stage like it in the world, mainly because it's the size of a city block. It's really, really big. It's a 6,000 seat theater, 3 mezzanines, and the stage itself is comprised of hydraulic elevators. These elevators were state-of-the-art at the time. The hydraulics that they used were based on the hydraulics they use in aircraft carriers. And because it was top secret state-of-the-art at the time, if you went down to the sub-basement where the elevators start, you would see military guards guarding this top secret technology. Now, by the time I was working there in the 90s, there were no military guards there anymore, and everything has been computerized, but it was a really big deal to have this technology at the time. The elevators can go down as low as nearly 30 feet, and they can rise up as high as 13 feet. So that makes a very interesting option for coming and going from the stage. So imagine one of the Rockette numbers, right? You do a beautiful ta-da. Instead of walking off the stage, the elevator lowers down. We disappear. Or the opposite can happen. We get on in the sub-basement. There was a number where we sat on a fence. We were dressed as reindeer, and we sat on a little fence. You get on the fence, and then we rise up to be revealed and start the number. So pretty interesting. Yeah. And they did the same thing with the orchestra. The orchestra, you don't know where they are, and then suddenly they rise up and there they are. It's really, really special. But it also is a lot of backstage safety and choreography, so that you're not walking into a gaping hole and falling 30 feet into the pit or where the elevators are down. So when we go into rehearsals, we rehearse in a large space in a rehearsal hall, and then when we move to the stage, one of the first things we do is walk the entire stage and understand all of the safety precautions that we need to know about. Something else interesting, the dressing rooms are not stage level, which is true for most Broadway houses, most Broadway theaters. Everything in New York is built up, right? So the elevators are not only on the stage, but they are off to the sides and how we get to and from our dressing rooms. So our dressing rooms for the Rockettes are on the 3rd floor, the 4th floor, and the 5th floor. And that's how we go to and from them at the beginning of the show and at the end of the show. During the show, we don't have time to go to our dressing rooms, because as you heard in the video, some of our changes are so fast. One of them is 78 seconds. That's crazy fast. So there's a whole network of dressers and helpers that help us in quick change booths right off the stage, so we don't have to go to our dressing rooms. It's quite amazing. Any questions so far about the stage or anything I've covered? Okay, I'm gonna keep rolling on. Sometimes this wants to work and sometimes it doesn't. There we go.
How old were you when you became a Rockette?
Okay, so the question was, how old was I when I became a Rockette? I was in my 20s when I started, and then I went away and did some other Broadway shows, and then I came back, and I was in my 30s when I went back and did it again, which I'll talk more about later. So I was like in my mid to late 20s. All right. So this is another little video that I found that was a nice kind of walk through time with the Rockettes. I think it goes into like the early 2000s, so it's not quite to today, but I think it's a beautiful overview of the history of the Rockettes, some of the beautiful costumes that they wore through the years, and there's a lot of historic footage, but there are also reenactments that happen in this video. And they made this video a year or two after I left, and a lot of my friends were still at Radio City. And so a lot of the reenactments are all people that I danced with, which is really fun for me. But I'll take my microphone off and play it next to the speaker so you can hear this. Okay, let me just fix my microphone. So pretty interesting, right? That walk through history and seeing all of the, time periods change, how the Rockettes changed, how their costumes changed, how the show changed. And I was actually there, and they talked about that restoration that happened in 1999. So my first year was 98. And then over that summer, by the time I came back in 1999, the theater had been completely refurbished. I mean, new carpet, from head to toe, the grand curtain was new, like everything was redone, and it was just it was already awe-inspiring, but you know, sometimes older buildings need a little brush up, right? And boy, it was really gorgeous. All right, how does one become a Radio City Rockette? Well, let me begin by saying all of the dancers are trained dancers. And for me, I started dancing at a very young age. I was 4 years old when my mom put me in tap shoes and sent me off to tap class. My mom had danced until she was about in high school, and then she let it go. But when I was little, she thought, oh, maybe that's something fun that I would like to do. And little did she and my dad know that it would be the journey for the rest of my life. I still dance. I'm an instructor here in the area. I teach right here in Holyoke at Mass Academy of Ballet, which is over in Open Square. I've also taught at Mount Holyoke College and Williston School, and more recently at a new conservatory that opened in East Hampton called CLI Conservatory. It's a program for pre-professional dancers, so pretty cool to be a part of that. But anyway, started dancing when I was little, and you know, I just kept loving it, and I just wanted to do more. And so through the years, kept adding more classes, more styles, and by the time I was in high school, you know, it takes a lot of means to support all of those classes. And my family and we had a little bit of financial hardship at the time. And I was trying to figure out, well, how am I going to keep these classes going? Because it's really important to me. So around age 15, I found another love, and that was for teaching. And I started teaching classes and started teaching little pre-ballerinas, 4 to 6-year-olds, and that was my first class. And that helped me to also pay for the classes that I was taking and continue that great love that I had. I went on to college. Graduated with a degree in dance performance as well as a theater minor. And in college is when I really got the musical theater bug. And I said, well, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to be on the musical theater stage. And that's what I did. But fast forward to my time in New York. So when I first moved to New York, it was around 1998. And the Christmas Spectacular was one of the first big auditions that I did. I had done some smaller auditions, but this one really meant a lot to me because I had never seen the Rockettes before in person because I'm from Indiana originally. I lived in the Midwest. So I could only see them on the Macy's Parade, the Jerry Lewis Telethon, and whenever they came on the television, my parents would call me into the room and they'd say, oh, the Rockettes are on, the Rockettes are on. And I remember that they tapped, and you know, being a little tap dancer, I saw them and I said, oh, well, they're like me, right? When you're little, you're like, oh yeah, they're just like me. They tap dance just like me. And so, you know, always idolized them, looked up to them. And so yeah, childhood dream, right? To be a Radio City Rockette. So I go to the audition and I find myself in a group of 500 women wrapped around Radio City on the sidewalk outside. And that's no joke. It's still like that to this day. About 500 young hopefuls show up every year to audition. So you got your dance bag and you're there and you're waiting to get into the building. They bring you in groups. You go to a large rehearsal hall. And what I recall of my audition was they put us in a long line. You had to step forward, say your name, where you were from. They had taught us a little short tap combination, but they wanted to hear it in character heels. So a little short tap combination and a double pirouette, which is a classical ballet pirouette, right and left, to show ballet technique. And that was the first cut. So that cut a lot of dancers. And if you made it through that, then you wait till they get through all those 500 people. And then they teach you more of the tap combinations. So you come back in, there's a lot of people still in the room. You learn more tap combination, and they put you in groups of 3. You show the combination 3 at a time, and then you either get to stay or you're let go. So luckily I got to stay. The next thing that happens is the height requirement. So there is a height requirement to be a Radio City Rockette, and it has changed over time. It was much shorter, longer ago, and I'll show you the last video I'll show you is a reunion of some Rockettes that were Rockettes many years ago and Rockettes that were more from my generation, and you'll see the height difference. It's quite a difference. So I think earlier it was more in the 5 foot, 5'5" range, but now it's I think even 5'3", but now it's 5'6" is the low end, 5'10.5" is the tall end. I'm 5'8", so I'm somewhere in the middle. But they do take women that are taller than 5'10.5" because they don't mind women being on the little taller side. Now, if you are of shorter stature, don't worry. There is still a spot for you in the Christmas Spectacular. There is a dancing, singing ensemble of men and women, and they like them on the shorter end to contrast with the height of the Rockettes. And they dance just as much as the Rockettes do, and that's how we all have time to change our costumes, because either the Rockettes are on stage or the dancing ensemble is on stage, and plus there's many others as well. Santa, Mrs. Claus, some little people, some ice skaters. Yes, that's all I can think of. Yes, a lot of people in the show. All right, so where am I? I am still at the audition. I meet the height requirement. And you can't cheat by wearing higher heels, and you can't cheat by putting your hair up real high, because they make you take off your shoes, and they put you against the wall, and they put a dowel right through your hairdo so they know exactly how tall you are. And that is a cut. There are women that try to sneak through, and they get cut, and it's very hard, but that happens. Okay, then we stay more, and we learn a little theater jazz combination in the precision dance style. So you learn that, perform it 3 at a time, that's another cut. And then when you've been there all day long and you just don't think you can dance anymore, they teach you a kick routine when you're really good and tired and your brain can't take any more information. But it's not a kick routine where you have to hook up with anyone next to you. You are individually kicking, but I think it's really smart that they do that. Even though it's difficult, I think that it's kind of a test. Because if you can make it through the rigors of the audition process, then you can make it through the rigors of the rehearsal process and the shows. There are so many shows that happen at Radio City. There are 36 shows in a week at the most. That means the show is never dark. And the way that we get a day off is that they do 2 complete different casts, a day shift and a night shift. Maybe you don't know that. So I was always in the night shift, and so we do the second half of the day shows. But the way we get a day off, which are Tuesdays and Thursdays, so on a Tuesday, I had my day off, the night shift had their day off, and the other cast did 4 shows that day. And then on Thursday, the day shift had their day off, and I did 4 shows that day. So it's a lot of shows, 90-minute shows, 4 of them in the day, and a lot of shows during the week. Just to give you some perspective, a regular Broadway schedule is 8 shows a week, and there's 36 at Radio City. We divide that in half between the 2 casts, and that's still 18 shows a week. So it's quite a marathon for sure. Okay, so made it through the day, did the kicks. You're all done, right? They say, oh, congratulations, you did such a great job today. We'd all like you all to come back tomorrow. Come back tomorrow? I just danced for you all day long. You want me to come back? Okay, so you do that. You go home and practice really hard, and then the next day, the room is filled with not just the women you auditioned with the day before, but women that had been a Rockette before that are coming back again. So you're suddenly thrust into, oh, who are all these new people that I don't know who they are? So I knew my group, and then the other group. So once you've been away from Radio City, the rule used to be for 4 years or more. They just want to see if you can still keep up with the show. Maybe you've been sitting on the couch for 4 years. They want to make sure you still got it, so they want to look at you again. So there I was, a brand new Rockette, never been a Rockette before. are trying to be a Rockette, and then the group, I've been a Rockette before, and there were about 40 of us in the room. So we did all the routines from the day before and learned a new one that was brand new to all of us. And then they make some cuts and you wait. You don't get to know that day, yes or no. You wait for a phone call, and you either get a phone call or you get nothing. No feedback, anything. But luckily, about a week later, I got a phone call, and I'll never forget it. I was in my New York apartment, I was in my kitchen, and it wasn't big time for cell phones yet then, so it was only online, old-fashioned, hello, this is Debra, and that phone call was just like, I'll just never forget it. I just had to sit down. Oh, yes, okay. And then, you just can't believe it. Like, your childhood dream comes true. What do you even do with that? You call your parents, you call your friends, and there you are, thrust into being a Rockette. So what I'm going to show you here is a video that I found that I think is a really accurate depiction of the callback process. So I'm not going to show you the whole audition process, but this is several years ago, but I think it really accurately depicts how the callback day goes. And they do lots of great interviews with some of the girls. And so I think I think this is a nice little piece here. All right, so a nice little piece, and I feel like it really accurately depicts the audition process. But can you imagine being at a nerve-wracking audition and the cameras are there filming you, and we're gonna pull you into a dressing room and interview you? I mean, those young women were so poised, and they did such a great job. And many of them actually have become Rockettes, so they got in, which is great. All right. Moving on. There's little me I was 4 years old when I started tapping, and then as I told you, I just kept wanting to dance, and this is me at 11 years old, and my studio decided to do a Rockette number, and so maybe it was foreshadowing, I don't know, but I had to include it because I just thought it was pretty cool that I got to do a Rockette number when I was 11. Okay. So these are my first years as a Rockette, and I know it's kind of small and hard to see, but as you can see, this is a red kind of majorette outfit and sequins from head to toe, this big headdress. And when I wore this costume, bless you, I really felt like, oh, I'm a Rockette now. Because when I was younger, I had seen this costume, this red, it's a tap number, had the boots. I just really felt like a Rockette. So that was a very special moment. And then this number we called sticks. And I don't know if you can tell, but I have sticks in my hand, they're drumsticks. And we wore on our backs xylophones, like little kid xylophones strapped to our back, like a backpack. And at the end of the number, it was called Carol of the Bells. We called it sticks, but we would line up in a line and we would play each other's backs. Jingle bells, jingle bells, jingle all the way. Switch, oh what fun. And we would play each other's backs, for real. We had to learn jingle bells. So as you can imagine, a lot of crazy things happen when you've got sticks in your hands, and they were like connected to us with little ropes. We would twirl them and catch them, and oh boy, sometimes we would lose them and try to get them back. But the funniest story about this number is I don't know if you can tell, but the headdress is this huge headdress with big plumes, big curved plumes. And they were basically hooks with feathers on them. So I don't know how this happened. It did not happen to me, but it happened in my show down the line. We kick, the kicks are always at the end, and then the ta-da, and what had happened, but two of the girls right next to each other had hooked their hats together. really did happen, and I don't know if it happened during the kicks or what, because you're kind of close together. So can you imagine, they're finishing the kicks, ta-da! And then they had to walk off stage. It wasn't an elevator exit, it was a walk off the stage exit, and they had to walk off, with their heads like this. So luckily it happened at the end of the number, but that really happened. And can you even imagine the audience? They were like, oh, I bet it was hilarious. But that's live theater, you just gotta keep going. Lots of stories like that, you just never know. So here I am, my second year. This is the iconic soldier number, which has been in the show, as you heard, since 1933. This number is, it's really, I loved being a part of it, and it will probably never leave the show. They'll always have it in the show because it's of that history. The other number that's been in the show that long is the Living Nativity, which happens toward the end of the show. So those two numbers will probably forever always be in the show. And then also that year, 1999, I don't know if you can see this kind of glitzy, diamondy costume with a wig. We called this the model number because we depicted models in a store window that came to life. And then we did this dance. So we also danced with ukuleles, which was really cool. And we wore these wigs that were made of fringe. And when we first got the wigs, they were much longer than in the picture. And the picture is kind of a little bob with an angle. But when we first got the costume, we were dancing in it, we realized that those fringes were a little too long for us to start moving around. We did turns, and the moment you breathed in, fringe went right up your nose, down your throat. It was choking us. So they said, oh, okay, well, that's not going to work. We can't have the Rockettes choking. So they cut them to the nice angled bob, which was still long enough to get into our mouth and nose, but we were able to handle it. We weren't choking, at least. So moving on. Trying to move on. Okay, so now we're in 2005. Wait a minute. What happened all those years in between? So as I mentioned earlier, I went away and did another show that was happening across town called A Christmas Carol, the musical. And that happened at the theater at Madison Square Garden, which is also a 6,000 seat theater, very big. And I got to work with a woman named Susan Stroman, who is a very well-known theater choreographer. I've worked with her many times since. And she was known for the producers. That was the big hot ticket for a while. Like Hamilton's the big hot ticket now. The producers back in the early 2000s was a hot ticket. So anyway, I went and did some other shows. And then around 2005, I said, well, I've moved to Massachusetts. I've met my husband, Debra Vega, but I'm going to go back and perform a little while. I don't know what I was thinking. I'm just going to go audition and see what happens. And so I go to that 2005 audition, because if you've been gone for more than 4 years, you got to audition all over again. I was thinking, what am I thinking? This is so much harder than when I was younger. But luckily, I knew the director. He remembered me from before. He was the assistant before, and then had worked his way up to the director position, and I got hired that year. And what was very special about that, even though I was already living here, I went to New York for about 3 months, sublet an apartment, but I was able to share that show life with Aaron and my family here. And that was very special because it was a big part of my life. So that 2005 and then 2006 were great times for me to be able to just share that showbiz love with my family. So here are a few more pictures. There's that reindeer costume I showed you about, or told you about. A few more. Sometimes this doesn't want to advance. Okay, this is also 2005. Really cute tap number. There was this set piece that spelled the word Rockettes in bright bulbs, and the letters rotated, and you stepped through the letters to reveal. And so I was behind the T. The T was my letter, so there's me hiding in the sub-basement behind the T. There's the ragdoll number. That number has been in the show a lot. it was in the show, and then they took it out of the show, and then they put it back in the show because it's such a favorite. And the costume has evolved over time, so it doesn't really look like this costume anymore, but it's still in the show. And then here are me and some of my fellow Rockettes in the elevator. As I told you, we rode the elevator to the stage. And do the elevators ever get stuck when you're on the way to the stage? Yeah, that's totally happened. So, usually they can get the Rockettes out pretty quickly and they don't have to hold the show too long. But that has not happened to me, but it has happened during a show that I was in. We were waiting, because some girls were stuck in the elevator. That's another reason we don't go in the elevator during the show. We don't want to get stuck. Okay, so here we are in 2006. This is the debut of the tap number, The 12 Days of Christmas. If you've seen the show in the last several years, since 2006, this number is still in the show. It's still in the show this year too. It's a long tap number that depicts the 12 Days of Christmas. Really cute costume, looks like candy stripes, candy cane stripes, and I love tap numbers, so it was one of my favorites. And then here's me doing a publicity event. I was at Grand Central Station for a publicity event, and Inside Edition happened to be there and do an interview with us. That wasn't supposed to be a part of the publicity, but sometimes microphones just get put in front of your face, and you gotta just go with it. So not only are we on the stage, but we are also doing, going about to television stations during interviews. We're given media training at the beginning of our rehearsal process, so we know how to talk in front of a microphone and talk about the Rockettes. So I just want to show you a little of my personal journey. This is a video of me on the Today Show. And I don't have much footage of me as a Rockette because it just doesn't exist. But this was a publicity event to advertise this book, which is called A Dance Through Time. And it is all about the costumes of the Rockettes through the years. And between 2005 and 2006, I was photographed to be in this book, so I'm in it a couple of times, which is cool. Anyway, I will show you that in a second. Oh yeah. So here, we all got individual pictures, so I'm in the little green costume, which was cool that I got to be in the green costume because that's the costume I wore when I was my first year that I was a Rockette. This was the opening number of the show. We came out of a Christmas tree. Maybe you saw those years. Anyway, and there's another one too. We were advertising. We were publicizing the release of this book, and here I am again. I'm near the fold in this really cute costume. They pulled all the costumes out of their archives and fixed them up so we could do the photo shoot for this book. So I got to wear this really cute older costume that had been pulled out of the archives. That was very cool. And then they said, okay, so they had some Rockettes talk about the book, but they wanted 10 of us to perform. And did they have us perform a number that was in the show currently? No, we had to learn a completely new number that was not in the show. So on top of our rehearsals that were for the spectacular, we learned in an extra rehearsal this routine. So we were all a nervous wreck during this performance because it was brand new material and, millions of people watching on the Today Show. But very cool experience to be on the Today Show. And I'm going to show this. You'll see that this is not the greatest video quality because this is the time where, what did we record things on? The VHS recorder. This is recorded on the VCR. So it's a little pixelated, but you'll get a good idea of what I got to experience. I also want you to notice that it's 44 degrees and our upper body's covered with, a nice warm furry coat and gloves, but our legs are just in some tan tights. So I'm just gonna say my feet were really cold that day. Oh, also you're going to see first the teaser. They had us do a short little version of the routine to say, oh, we're coming up. They went to commercial, and then they came back, and you'll say, and now the Rockette. You'll hear it, and now the Rockettes. That's what you'll see next. We'll be back right after this. Yeah, so that's quite a long routine, right? We had to learn that. It was so crazy. And whenever I watch it, I think, well, gosh, that looks so easy. But when you're doing it, it's not easy, I promise you. All right, so the last thing I'd like to show you is a video of an alumni event. There is a Rockette Alumni Association, which I'm a part of. And they, once in a while, will get together and have little gatherings where we put on our tap shoes and tap together and see old friends. I wasn't able to go to this one, so celebrating 90 years of the Rockettes. My son was quite young at the time, and I couldn't make it, but there are a lot of people in this video that I know and danced with. But they're interviewing Rockettes from way back into, like they're here, 1941. So it's pretty cool. And this is where you're going to see those height differences that I talked about, how the Rockettes from long ago are a little bit on the shorter side. All right, so I'm just going to show this to you. And then after that, I'll take some questions if you want to think of questions. So neat, right? So beautiful. All right, so I would love, with the time we have left, to open up to questions, and hopefully I can unravel any of those mysteries that you've been just wondering about. Yes?
Do you mind sharing us? I mean, you have a wonderful physique now.
Oh.
How do you make, what food do you eat?
What food do I eat? That's a... All right, so, okay, so first of all, I get a lot of exercise in my life, just in my daily life. I have a young son who is 8 years old, and so, you know, keeping up with him is just a natural way to exercise daily. I'm also a yoga instructor. Maybe some of you, I know some of you have taken my classes here at the Senior Center. I teach yoga in the chair on Fridays at 10, but my husband and I also own and run a mobile yoga studio, bringing yoga to you in your home, your workplace, and in our community. So I teach a lot of yoga during the week, and as I mentioned earlier, I also still teach dance. So I'm quite active, and so it's not so much what do I eat, I think it's more how can I keep moving? And then the food that I put into my body is fuel. Because I'm moving so much, I need to fuel my body. So just generally though, I'm not a vegetarian. I was at one time, but I still don't eat a lot of red meat. I love fish, I love chicken, I love turkey, and vegetables, and mashed potatoes. I mean, I think it's all moderation. Yeah. Eat what you love, but don't fill yourself too much, and keep moving. I think keeping moving is really the key.
Do you eat desserts though?
Oh yes, when I want a dessert, I will eat a dessert. But I don't eat a dessert every day because I don't really have a big sweet tooth. It's not. My body doesn't say you need sweets. My body says you need fuel. Yes?
How long did they give you to learn these routines before you got on to the next?
Okay, so the question is, how long did they give us to learn the routines in the rehearsal process? So my recollection is we learned the whole show within days. They just kept giving us information. And then you rehearse for several more weeks after that in the rehearsal hall to get it all of the formations and get the preciseness. I always say it's kind of like I've never been in the military, but what I would imagine be the military version of a dance company. It's very structured, rigid, you know, we're just like, everything's so sharp, and you have to practice so much when you're on your off time, warm up in the morning, and then be ready, because you don't want to be that one Rockette that's like turning the wrong way, right? You don't want that to happen. And then once we've learned the steps, we transfer it to the stage without costumes or anything. So we do the safety walk on the stage. We then put ourselves on the stage with our numbers, so it looks a lot different on the stage than it does in the rehearsal hall. So you just like have to get your bearings a little bit, and everything's marked out with lines. So I told you earlier, there's 4 elevators on the stage, and each elevator has its own dotted and straight line system. So it would be like a line of purple and a dotted line of purple, a line of white and a dotted line of white, a line of green and a dotted line of green. And that was every elevator. So you would be like, okay, so I'm on the 4th elevator and I'm on number 2, and then my next step I go to number 4, and then my next step I go to 0. I mean, it's like that. So we do on the stage, and that takes about a week. And then we add the technical elements, the costume changes, and that's almost like it's a whole nother piece of choreography. So I would say in total about 6 weeks.
So you start in September, they start you in September?
Yeah, September, October, yeah.
And then you start in November already to take them?
Yeah, the beginning of November is the opening. Yeah, so it's like 2 months of Christmas. Yeah. If you add rehearsals, 3 months of Christmas, a lot of Christmas. Yeah. Yes?
What is the maximum weight limit?
Maximum weight limit. Okay, so a lot of people ask this question. There is not a weigh-in, there's a height requirement, there's not a weight requirement. However, they have costumes from the years before, and I think a certain look that they're looking for when they cast the show. So they want you to be able to somewhat fit into the costumes without a lot of alterations. They do fit the costumes to your body though, once you get cast. But then in the rehearsal process, they do what's called a body composition test. So it's not just being weighed, it's kind of measuring, like, you know, if you've ever done it, they squeeze all your fat areas. They take the thing and they're like, hey, tricep, how much fat you got there? So they create a weight range that is 12 pounds, 12-pound range, that they ask that you stay within during the duration of the show. And that's for 2 reasons. One, they don't want you to have to be altering a lot of costumes. And you know, it's very expensive, the costumes, you know, they just want them to fit you. And 2, it's for your health and safety that you don't get too thin. Because I don't know anyone that can gain weight doing the Christmas Spectacular. As I told you, we do 18 shows a week. And really, you don't have a lot of time to eat between shows, so I would eat enough nourishment to keep me going. Small meals, and then at night I was starving, and I would go home and I'd order a whole pizza and I'd eat it. I was hungry, and then I'd go to bed and start over the next day. So really, I don't think anyone can gain weight during the duration of the show. They don't want you to get too thin though. They want you to stay healthy and dancing in the show.
Did they have a hair limit?
What's that?
Did they have a hair limit?
A hair limit?
How long it has to be?
No, I think they ask that your hair is of a natural color. They know it's on trend now to have like lots of bright colors. So that's number 1. Number 2, there's not a length requirement, but they are known for the French twist. We did a French twist on our own hair every day. I got really good at them for a time, although it always looked a little bad. I was like, I can't ever, it's really hard to get it all in. But anyway, when I worked there was a gal in the cast who had just done a movie where she had to shave her head for the movie. It was a Will Smith movie, and the special effects, she was in a dance number where I think she had to be painted or something. So she was growing her hair back from that and did not have hair enough to do a French twist, so they put a wig on her, a French twist wig. So they can work around different hair lengths.
Do they have makeup artists, or do they
We do all our own hair and makeup every day. Yeah, it's all up to us. So we have to get there, you know, say the show starts at 10 in the morning. You're required to be there 30 minutes before, but I needed to be there an hour and a half before to do my hair, to do my makeup, to stretch and just get my body ready for the day and have a little bite to eat and then get ready, put on my costume. Yeah. Good questions. Any other mysteries I can unfold for you? Anything you've been dying to know about? Okay. Well, I'm just going to wrap it up and just say, now that Broadway is opening back up again, and they're doing lots of health and safety precautions to make sure that the audiences are vaccinated and proof of vaccination and lots of different precautions, I hope that one day we'll feel safe enough to go back and see the Radio City Christmas Spectacular, support those hardworking Rockettes and all of the other wonderful professionals that are dancing on Broadway. I hope maybe I've given you a little insight into this iconic group. Go to YouTube, there's tons and tons of stuff, more recent interviews about how they're diversifying the line. They were even diversifying the line back when I was there, but now it's really something very important to them. And there are a lot of women of color on the line now, which is, I think, a great thing for that institution. And yeah, so thank you so much for your interest, and thank you for listening today.